Okay, so we should be going at this time. Should be started. Just need to reload to make sure everything is going. Check my dashboard. Yes, I'm seeing it. We are online. Great. So first of all, I just want to make sure that everyone can hear me. If you can hear me, let me know in the chat. Pop some kind of comment in the chat. I just want to make sure I know that I may have screwed up my previous link. I should be ready to go now. So thank you to everyone for joining us today. I'm going to do a quick test. Hi. Yes, I can see it. Hello there. Okay, hi, Fatty Max. Okay, I'm seeing it. Okay, excellent. So congrats for investing in your family by learning with AI Parenting Live. We're a judgment-free community moving from screen time to quality time. Our motto is don't sedate, relate to create. Now, today we are going to be exploring we're going to focus on the sedate theme. In particular, we are going to explore ethics and bias in artificial intelligence. Now, tech is a world of secrets. Sometimes the secrets are fun, like finding an Easter egg in your favorite program or game. Like finding a flight simulator and pinball game hidden in Microsoft Excel 97. Maybe you guys have seen this, maybe not, I don't know. Take a look. So you can see in this one, just regular Excel, like no big deal. I'm just going in, editing some text here, all good, all good. And what happens? You push a button and boom, all of a sudden you're in a flight simulator. Isn't that cool? Like they built in a rendering engine. They have some procedurally generated textures in this thing. They have text that's scrolling. How cool is that? I love it. I absolutely love it. So what's your favorite Easter egg? Come on, put it in the chat. Let me know what is your favorite Easter egg that you're familiar with. Anyone that you love. I would love to hear. What is your favorite, your most favorite Easter egg? Awesome. Keep it. I will. Don't worry. I'll highlight you once we have this. Let me just make sure I pause this because it's gonna get really crazy. So I can already see. Maybe if I put the chat back, we've got Fatty Max here. He's already saying hello there. I can hear you. So we'll pop in the chat on a fairly regular basis. Now let's see if I can go. Yes, excellent. Okay. So sometimes it's a cool Easter egg. Other times it's like this visual illusion, like the first Doom game that had us wondering, how did they do that? Put in the chat, what is your favorite visual illusion from tech? Any favorites? Any games that you thought was like, wow? Finding your stream on Periscope. Yes, thank you, Fatty. Today we are covering a rather serious topic of AI ethics. So we wanted to make sure that we wanted to start with a lighter tone. And there will be some doom and gloom, but I promise that there can be light at the end of this tunnel. So the three topics that we'll cover today are, one, the cost of bravery. The second is biased input. The third is power, also known as technology. And I promised light at the end of this tunnel, so we'll share tools for fighting back. Are you ready? Pop ready in the chat. Yes? Ready? Ready. Awesome. Okay. The first one that I'm going to explore is the cost of bravery. There's another type of secret, dark secrets that must not be named, which gets very little press outside of tech circles. We're ending Black History Month by revealing these Voldemort level secrets of ethics in AI. I'm aware that by speaking on the topic of AI ethics, it puts me at risk of the same fate as many of my colleagues in academia and industry. The consequences range from having your internet accounts banned to having your academic reputation tarnished, to being asked to go on medical leave even though you're not sick, and ultimately to losing your job. This was the cost of bravery for Google's former ethical AI team leaders, Dr. Timnit Gebru and Dr. Margaret Mitchell. The cost was a public attack on MIT researcher Joy Buolamwini's work on facial recognition bias by Amazon. The cost was the untold jobs lost in efforts to form new tech worker unions. These brave souls knew the risk to their careers, their income, and their families. They felt this fear directly, and they still chose to speak up. They chose to speak up because they know that we are at a major turning point in the tech industry. I know that outside of the tech world, these departures may not seem like a big deal. After all, we're living more comfortably. Our purchases magically arrive at our doorsteps. News is more convenient and fun when we see updates from our friends. And there's an endless source of movies and entertainment available at our fingertips. What more could we ask for? What more? What could these brave souls be sharing that would possibly merit such personal and professional risk? Well, let me ask you this. How much would you trust a facial recognition technology if it identified you as the wrong gender just because your skin was a little darker? How would you feel? Pretty shitty. Probably. Yeah. Would you feel comfortable having this technology used by the US law enforcement? No? No? In 2018, MIT researcher Joy Buolamwini published a video on facial recognition bias. Her video was particularly critical of Amazon's AI for facial recognition, recognition with a K. Amazon stated on their site that recognition was being used by US law enforcement. Joy showed that Amazon had an error rate of up to 34.7% when identifying the gender of images of women with dark skin, compared to error rates of, say, 17% from competitors like IBM. But if you looked at the error rate, it was less than 1% for men and women of light-skinned colors. The video included the now iconic picture of Oprah Winfrey, labeled by Amazon's recognition as a 76.5% chance of being male. So what did Amazon do? Amazon blasted her study as making erroneous claims in a blog post. And even after a coalition of researchers, including AI pioneer and recent Turing Award winner Joshua Benigo, they came to her defense, but the damage had already been done. You see, the post wasn't directed at other computer science researchers, but rather it was designed to sow doubt among the general public. It took over 2 years for Amazon to place a 1-year moratorium on using recognition for law enforcement. And by the way, this moratorium is set to expire this June. So the victory was short-lived. The Amazon blog post claimed that they had a less than 1% error rate for people of different ethnicities. What? But Joyce found 34.7%. So this led Joy to say, we can't just leave it to the companies alone to do these kind of checks. We can't leave it to the companies. We can't leave the checking to the companies themselves. But that leads to the question, like, who? Who has the time, the knowledge, the capacity to audit AI like this? I promise I will give more on this later. Is this making sense so far? Is this sinking in? Oh, I see Edith. Edith is back. Yay, thank you. It says, hi, Edward. hello. Okay, welcome. Okay, awesome. Hey, I really appreciate it. It looks like, as usual, somehow my chat connection with Facebook doesn't work anymore, so I'm checking Facebook manually. I'm also checking LinkedIn manually because sometimes I look at this and it doesn't work, so. Perfect. So my next point that I'm going to dive into is, oops, we just did that one. That's not the one. Cost of Bravery. The next one is biased input. What do I mean by biased input? This is a very important concept. Terence Sheehan described 3 different examples of AI bias. First, US healthcare used a healthcare cost history to determine who needed extra medical care. This had the effect of favoring white patients over black patients because they had a higher healthcare cost history, which is really just a way of saying they just spent more on healthcare. So therefore, the system would recommend that white patients take more treatment than black patients. This is the reality. The US court system, they used a correctional offender management profile for alternative sanctions, or COMPAS for short. The system used historical data to determine who would likely become a repeat offender. The model predicted that black offenders were twice as likely to commit future crimes than their white counterparts. So the algorithm had that bias built in because that's the bias wasn't. I'll talk about this in a bit. Amazon, it had hiring algorithm. It used historical data to determine who to hire. And since more men were hired in the past, it tended to favor men. All three of these examples, let's see, maybe I'll switch to this one. So all three of these examples, they showed how bias can be present in the data to begin with, right? So if you start with data that has the bias built in, like historical information, that bias, when you train an AI on it, will contain those same biases. This is a very important concept because AI, it doesn't think critically about the data that it's being fed, right? That's our job. And so if you train the AI which contains this biased information, you will get biased results on the other end. Is that making sense? Is that sinking in? Awesome. The AI is not trying to be cruel, but it's trained with data that comes with embedded bias. So what do I mean by that? So let me just double check the comments here. Okay, yeah. It listens to, say, the unconscious milliseconds we spend browsing social media feeds. In terms of browsing, we browse the height of the Statue of Liberty every single day with our thumbs. Our fight or flight response causes our thumbs to scroll away from things that scare us and react in anger and outrage online. Now, the healthcare, justice, and worker examples are just the tip of the iceberg. You really start to see the power of these organizations when their AI is systematically tested for bias. So, do you want to know the paper that got Timnit Gebru fired from Google? Yes? Pop yes in the comments. Yes. This paper is titled On the Dangers of Stochastic or Random Guessing Parrots. Can language models be too big? And there's actually like a little emoji of a parrot on it. It's very cute. So the purpose of large language models, or LLMs, is to analyze huge bodies of text in order to randomly generate new text, such as translations in a different language. So you can also think beyond like Google Translate, because it can also be used to generate blogs and social media posts that seem like a person actually wrote it. It's actually quite good. So for example, college student Liam Poor used OpenAI's GPT-3 language generator to create a daily random AI-generated self-help blog from a series of carefully selected titles. The AI was trained from a language model of thousands of self-help blogs. And good news, it went viral. People liked what they saw. Tens of thousands watched, liked, and commented on the daily posts. Many of the posts read like a typical self-help blog, but sometimes the structure was a bit odd, and sometimes the main message didn't make any sense. Yet only 3 of the tens of thousands critical thinkers ever questioned if the blog was made by a real person. And guess what? Those comments, this thing can't be real. They were quickly downvoted. Quickly downvoted. Can I please post a link to this paper, asks Aluna. 100%. I have references for everything, and what I'll do is I'll just send a reply to yours right away. Therefore, you have it. I will make a separate blog post about this as well. But thank you for your question. Absolutely, I will. Now, can you imagine an AI like this being used to quickly generate misinformation? I mentioned in a previous live stream that Section 230 Safe Harbor discourages companies from moderating content. So imagine your social media feed flooded with what looks like legitimate news articles powered by a bot army of AI-generated extreme news. It's happening. It happens. Even incorrect translations can also cause harm when they're connected with law enforcement. So for example, in 2017, Facebook mistranslated a Palestinian man's good morning post to the Hebrew attack them, leading to his arrest. So let's go back to Jebru and her team that showed that these large language models consume, one, a lot of energy. One model, training for one model is the equivalent to the lifetime carbon emissions of 5 cars. She also showed that AI trained with large bodies of text often contain racist or sexist language in their training input. The input itself has the bias built in. Me Too and Black Lives Matter has tried to establish a new anti-sexist and anti-racist vocabulary. But AI trained to manipulate language rather than understand it will always contain the biases of everyone on the internet rather than the voice of a vocal few. A 2020 paper on Google's translation and large text query engine, BERT, showed that BERT tended to associate phrases referring to disabilities such as cerebral palsy or blindness with negative language. So what happened? What happened with this paper? Well, Timnit was fired from Google after rejecting a manager's request to retract or remove her name from the paper. Later, Google's head of research stated that the paper failed to cite research on making more efficient language models and ways to mitigate bias. Guys, this paper had 128 citations. It was described as a very solid and well-researched piece of work by University College London researchers. The number of references was not the limiting factor here. And this was only the start for the ethical AI team at Google. On February the 5th, another leader of Google's ethical AI team, you may have heard this if you're in the computer science circles. Her name is Dr. Margaret Mitchell. She lost access to her work accounts after speaking up on the firing of Dr. Timnit Gebru. And few days later, on February 19th, she learned that she had been terminated with cause. At the same time that Sami Bengio, a director at Google with roughly 300 reports, was outed from his management role at Google's ethical AI. Sami had already expressed support for Timnit, and he was an advocate for women at Google. He hired 39% women compared to 14% on average for the rest of the research organization at Google. We've heard about some research changes, tying executive compensation to diversity and inclusion goals. Yet the discussion around ethical AI, especially at Google, remains slowed at best. Which brings me to my next point, which is very important. But before I move on, is this making sense so far? A little bit more doom and gloom, a little bit more consequences. I hope it's making sense. I'm switching between all of the different platforms, just making sure that I don't miss anybody's comments, because I want to make sure that I'm there and I'm able to listen. Hi, this is Cynthia. Would you have an email? I can send an inquiry to you. Yes, 100%, Cynthia. I will send you my email. Okay, thank you. Just checking. I do want to make sure. Okay, thank you. Perfect. Yes. So, last point. Not last point. Power, also known as technology. As educators, parents, researchers, and industry, we need to take this moment very seriously. AI isn't new. So how did it move from a modest backwater to the crown jewel of engineering programs? How are tech monopolies positioning themselves for the coming AI gold rush? Now, Meredith Whittaker was one of the core organizers of the 2018 Google walkouts and is a co-founder of the AI Now Institute. She made a bold move to completely rewrite her talk in light of the recent events with Google's ethical AI team. Comment from Edna, great insights, thanks, I'm following. Excellent, thank you. Meredith explained that most people don't see that, and this is her quote, concentrated power is masquerading as technology innovation. Tech rebelled against retail, media, and how we communicate. And so now these tech monopolies put control of entire industries in the hands of fewer and fewer people. So how much power are we talking about here? Like, are tech companies as powerful as a city? Are they as powerful as a country? Write it in the comments. Yes or no? Would you say Google is as powerful as a country? Yes? Yes. Yes. That's right. Some of you saw this power being exercised on February 18th when Facebook decided to flip a switch and shut down all news for a country on their platform, would Australia's own government be able to shut down all news as easily as Facebook was able to? No, probably not. Now, if you don't like who's leading your government, you can vote for the opposition. But if you don't like Facebook, you don't get a say in who is the next CEO. The super voting share structure of tech companies gives some founders 20 times the voting rights of regular shareholders, that like shares that you can buy on the stock market. And as a result, Mark Zuckerberg owns 60% of all voting shares for Facebook. Sergey Brin and Larry Page own 51% of all voting shares of Alphabet. Super voting shares have created a tech nobility that is immune to public outcry. They're not afraid. Edna, oh, I gotta bring this one in. Thank you for sharing, Edna. Edna says, yes, Google is powerful as a nation. Great insights. Thanks, I'm following. Thanks so much, Edna. There's another challenge. A lot of the progress in AI has been due to access to much, much more computing power and much more input data. And so for this reason, academics have dual affiliation as both academics and industry. Like, for example, I work for a university and I work for Google at the same time. So like I'm an adjunct at the university, but I am also employed by Google. I experienced this myself, and I'm thankful for having both industry and academic affiliation during my PhD in computer science, because it exposed me to many real world problems and it gave me access to equipment that I would otherwise not have had available. Researchers like us have no choice but to rely on the tech giants for the infrastructure to advance the state of the art. Academics conferences themselves are expensive, so we are thankful for the sponsorship from big tech companies. But what happens when you bite the hand that feeds you as a researcher? People know who pays them. Meredith Whittaker said, "It's unfair to assume that someone funded by a company cannot be critical of big tech." That's true. Many examples exist of being critical of big tech, which didn't have the consequences that I described today. But look at this from a broader system perspective for a moment. Okay, so rather than like one example here, one example there, I want us to understand things from a systemic perspective. And so that's why I was really interested in the Gray Hoodie project, led by University of Toronto researcher Mohammed Abdallah. He drew parallels between big tech funding for AI and the way that tobacco companies paid for research into the health effects of smoking in the 1950s. Now, this is important. History repeats itself. And if we don't understand history, we are bound to make the exact same mistakes. Mohammed's research found that of the over 100 of the computer science faculty that he studied, over 58% of the computer science faculty he studied received funding from big tech. While Abdallah says that industry funding is not necessarily compromising, he worries that it might have some influence by discouraging them to pursue certain research projects if they know, for example, it might be ultimately reviewed by a lawyer. Now, is this sinking in, right? So what it is it's not that they're fully restricting, but if they know that there's going to be somebody who's going to vet it and review it, like you would just not even pursue certain lines of research. And so as a result, like the funding goes towards where research should be. It's like, oh, I'm looking for more research in this area, so you fund it like crazy, and so you get a lot more research in that area. And then the areas that are more critical, you just don't fund them, and so it becomes really hard to publish anything on it. And so that's a way of changing the discourse in academia towards what you want. So that is the 1950s smoking playbook for manipulating research. Make sense? Awesome. So now that I've talked about the challenges, I mentioned the doom and gloom. Now let's talk about the solutions. Oh no. Let's do this. Okay, yeah. There we go. Fighting back. I think the loss of Facebook News is a strong reminder that we need to make sure that we need many sources for our own news, and we also need a lot more critical thinking for the news that we see. For writers and media, for writers and media creators, I'd advise don't focus your efforts on a single platform. My philosophy has been to share your message on as many platforms as possible. It's actually what I'm doing right now. Like I'm sharing on multiple platforms. And the reason for this is this advice comes from the pain and the feeling of helplessness of having my own Google account banned in error years ago. Having invested so heavily in Google services, I had no choice but to hope and pray that they would restore my accounts. So as a result, I recommend that you use systems like Buffer or Crowdfire, Hootsuite, and others to broadcast your message to multiple platforms. Companies have full control of your online voice when you only publish to a single platform. When they ban your account, they don't just take away your posts, but they take away your ability to get the word out through your social media following, right? Your following is how you distribute and get things out. They control that too, and they prevent you from reaching your followers. So make sure that you find ways to mirror your connections across multiple platforms owned by different companies, right? So I have a LinkedIn account, I have a Snapchat account, I have a TikTok account, I have all of the accounts. And I'm trying to find people that I know in one place and then trying to make sure that I build up the audience in all of the different platforms so that we can remain protected and we are not held hostage by a single platform. If you're an academic, and you're not funded by big tech, it can be hard to compete with the resources of your dual affiliation peers. So my challenge to you is would be like, see how you can be an independent voice of accountability for the AI and algorithms that impact our society. Evaluating an AI can be done without the huge amount of resources needed to create one in the first place. So be the ethical voice in the AI dialogue. And finally, and last but not least, for parents and educators, teach your kids about unconscious input, like the milliseconds that impact what they're going to watch next on YouTube or YouTube Kids. Be curious about their interests so you can influence what they watch next, and you can create the disruption that you want to see in the world. How are we doing for time? We still have some time. And I want to leave some time specifically for your questions. But as my speaking time comes to a close, I do want to leave you with a quote from poet and philosopher Amanda Gorman's presidential inauguration speech. Amanda said, "We will not be turned around or interrupted by intimidation, because we know that our inaction and inertia will be the inheritance of the next generation. Our blunders become their burdens. And one thing is certain: if we merge mercy with might and might with right, then love becomes our legacy and our children's birthright. For there is always light, if only we're brave enough to see it, if only we're brave enough to be it." Thank you. We love you all. See you next week.